The galactic hall was vast, shining with silver walls and glowing with 1,000 alien lights. At its center, the leaders of the Galactic Council sat in their tall seats, staring down at the human delegation. The hall was silent, so silent that every breath, every step echoed like thunder. Humanity had been summoned not as equals, not as members of the Great Alliance, but as the accused. The council chambers had seen many trials before, but none carried a tension like this. The humans stood proud in the middle of the chamber. They had no chains, but they were prisoners all the same. Their leader, Ambassador Renard, faced the council with steady eyes. He did not beg. He did not bow. Humanity had come to hear judgment. A voice rose from above, cold and sharp. It belonged to Seraphis, one of the council's most powerful members. His voice cut through the silence. "Humans," he declared, "your species has broken the laws of the stars. You have spread too quickly. You have built weapons beyond your station. You are reckless, violent, and dangerous. The galaxy cannot trust you." Murmurs filled the hall. Some alien leaders nodded in agreement, their strange eyes glowing with disdain. Others remained quiet, watching, weighing the words. Renard raised his voice, strong but calm. "We have done nothing but survive. We learned your laws. We respected your borders. We asked for a place among the stars. Why now do you turn against us?" But the council did not answer with reason. They answered with fear. Another councillor rose, his shadow long and dark. "Because we have seen what you are capable of. Entire fleets destroyed, entire empires rebuilt with your hands. You do not bend, you conquer, and we will not allow it." The decision was final before Renard could speak again. The council's ruling was announced with cold authority. "Humanity is hereby banished from the stars. No ship may trade with you. No world may give you shelter. You are exiled forever." The words fell heavy like chains around Earth's neck. Renard clenched his fists but did not show fear. His voice rang across the chamber one last time. "You believe this will end us. But humanity has lived through fire before. Remember this day, Council. Remember what you chose." He turned and walked out, his delegation following in silence. The council did not stop him. They believed exile was a death sentence. When news reached Earth, the world fell into shadow. Trade routes were cut. The great markets of the stars closed their gates. Colonies cried out for food and resources, but no help came. Earth was alone. At first there was chaos. Governments shouted, leaders blamed each other, and riots burned through cities. The people feared this was the end, that the galaxy had doomed them to slow starvation. But slowly, something changed. Humanity, always stubborn, always unyielding, refused to fall. In the broken streets, leaders rose from the ashes. Engineers and builders came together, using scraps and wreckage to craft what the council had taken away. Old nations began to unite under one banner, not because they trusted each other, but because survival demanded it. The skies above Earth became alive with activity. Shipyards lit the night with fire and steel. Miners dug into the deep rocks of forgotten moons. Farmers turned deserts green with new machines. Humanity began to rebuild, not for survival alone, but for something greater. In the silence of space, fleets of ships were born, ships that carried no mark of the Galactic Council, no symbol of submission. They carried only the mark of mankind, and with each ship, with each new engine that roared into life, a thought grew stronger in every human heart. We will not die in exile. We will rise. Far beyond Earth in the council chambers, whispers spread. Scouts reported that humanity had not collapsed as expected. Instead, they had grown stronger. The council tried to ignore the reports, but fear crept into their voices. How can they survive without us? One asked. They were supposed to fade into silence, another said, but humanity was no longer silent. Across the void, a new sound was born, the deep hum of human warships, gathering in secret, waiting for the day they would return. Ambassador Renard stood on a cliff one night, looking over the shipyards below. Thousands of workers moved like ants, welding steel, testing engines, forging destiny. He whispered into the wind, "They wanted us gone. Instead, they gave us reason to unite. They wanted us weak. Instead, they made us strong, and with that, the path was set. Humanity was no longer just surviving. Humanity was preparing. Thus began the exile, not an end, but a beginning. The galaxy thought it had silenced mankind. But in the dark, in the silence of exile, humanity was building something the Council could never imagine, a dominion that would one day stretch across the stars. The exile was not a single moment. It was a long shadow that stretched across every corner of human space. The Galactic Council believed exile would break humanity, but in truth, it was only the beginning of a much harder journey. At first, despair ruled. Colonies that once relied on trade with alien markets began to starve. Mining outposts sent distress signals, begging for help, but no ships came. Cargo routes, once alive with light, turned dark. Families on faraway moons had to survive on scraps of food and recycled air. On Earth, the situation was worse. Millions lost their jobs as alien corporations closed their doors. The Council had not just exiled humanity, they had strangled it. Hunger, riots, and violence spread like fire through the streets, and yet in that darkness, something new began to grow. In the capital city of New Geneva, leaders gathered in secret halls. They were not kings or presidents. They were generals, scientists, and builders, people who had seen war, who had endured famine, who understood that survival came not from words, but from will. Dr. Alina Vera, a scientist known for her brilliance, stood before the Council of Humans. Her voice was calm but filled with fire. "We cannot wait for mercy from those who hate us. We must build our own future with our own hands. If the galaxy shuts us out, then let us create something greater." Beside her, Admiral Cade Dorian nodded. His face was scarred from old battles, but his eyes burned with determination. "The Council believes exile will kill us. Let us prove them wrong. Let us rise from this struggle, stronger than they can ever imagine." Their words spread like lightning. From one colony to the next, a message was carried: stand, fight, build. In the deserts of Mars, old shipyards that had been abandoned came alive again. Families who once farmed the red soil now worked with steel and fire, crafting ships out of broken parts. Children carried tools to their parents, learning to build before they could read. On Titan, workers dug deep into the ice, mining fuel to power engines that no alien would ever touch. Entire communities lived underground, their lives hard, their bodies cold, but their spirits unbroken. On Earth, factories roared louder than ever before. Machines forged weapons not seen since the great wars of humanity's past. Soldiers trained in silence, ready for a future no one dared to speak aloud, but everyone knew was coming. Still, the struggle was not only with hunger or work, it was also with fear. There were many who believed the Council was right. "Why resist?" they asked. "Why not beg for forgiveness?" But humanity had begged before, and begging had brought them only chains. Ambassador Renard, who had faced the Council, traveled from world to world, speaking to the people. His words were simple, spoken not like a ruler, but like a man who had nothing left but truth. "They cast us into the dark, hoping we would die. But look around you. Do you not see the fire in our hands? Do you not hear the roar of our forges? The Council has given us no choice but to fight for our survival. And in that fight, we will find something greater, freedom." Slowly, the fear began to fade. In its place, unity began to take root. For the first time in centuries, humanity stopped fighting itself. Old nations that once drew lines on maps now erased them. For survival, they had to be one people. The years of exile turned into years of struggle, and the struggle turned into strength. The Council had expected humanity to crumble. Instead, they adapted. They learned. They taught fleets of small ships. At first, only cargo haulers were refitted with weapons. Raiders that once preyed on human trade were hunted down by new human militias. Pirates that tried to strike at Earth were destroyed by ships that were faster and more dangerous than anyone expected. Soon, whispers spread even in the Council's own halls. Humanity should have been gone by now. They are still alive, still building. They should not have this power, but no one could stop it. On a cold night above Earth, Admiral Dorian stood on the bridge of the first great warship built in exile. The ship was massive, its hull made of steel mined from the moons, its engines glowing with power. The crew stood ready, every one of them silent, waiting for his words. Dorian looked out into the blackness of space. "This ship is not just metal," he said. "It is proof that we endure. It is proof that we will never bow. Let the Council fear what we have built, for it is only the beginning." The engines ignited, blazing like blue fire across the sky. The first true warship of the Dominion had taken flight. From that day forward, the struggle no longer felt like despair. It felt like preparation. Every hardship became fuel. Every failure became a lesson. Every sacrifice became a step towards something greater. The Council believed they had punished humanity. But in truth, they had forced humanity to evolve. And deep in their hearts, the people began to whisper a new name for themselves. Not exiles, not outcasts, not victims, but something far stronger: the Dominion. The years of exile had carved deep scars across humanity, but out of those scars came something unexpected: rebirth. What the Council thought would be the end had instead become the foundation of something greater. Across Earth and its colonies, the signs of change were everywhere. The broken streets of old cities were rebuilt into shining towers of steel. Shipyards that once struggled to weld scraps now produced fleets of sleek, deadly vessels. Factories that had gone dark glowed again with light, powered by inventions no alien had ever seen. Humanity had been forced to stand alone, and in standing alone, they discovered their true strength. Dr. Alina Vera walked through the grand hall of the Dominion Research Center, a place built out of exile's ashes. Around her, young scientists worked at glowing screens, testing engines, weapons, and shields that the Council had declared forbidden. She smiled, knowing each machine was not just metal, but a symbol of survival. Her words echoed to her students. "The Council said we were dangerous." They were right, but danger is not a curse, it is our gift. With it, we will shape our own destiny. Her research uncovered fragments of old human technology once buried beneath Earth's ruins. Ancient blueprints, forgotten weapons, and designs left unfinished by past wars were brought back to life. But now they were refined with new knowledge, with the hunger of a people who had nothing to lose. Admiral Cade Dorian, scarred and seasoned, stood at the helm of humanity's growing fleet. Once he had only a handful of ships. Now he commanded hundreds. He walked the bridge of the Dominion's newest creation, the Invictus, a battleship so large its shadow could cover an entire city. Its hull was layered with armor that shimmered like black glass. Its engines glowed with fire so bright they lit up the void. "This ship," Dorian told his crew, "is not a weapon. It is a promise that humanity will never kneel again." The crew saluted, every man and woman knowing the truth. The Dominion was no longer a dream. It was real, alive, and unstoppable. Colonies once on the edge of despair were reborn under the Dominion's rule. On Mars, crimson deserts became seas of industry, with factories that never slept. On Europa, frozen oceans were cracked open, feeding new life and energy into the fleet. Even Earth, once broken by riots and famine, now glowed brighter than ever before. Children who had once known hunger now grew up watching ships soar into the sky. Families who had feared the darkness now lived with hope burning in their hearts. Everywhere the Dominion's banner flew high, a silver star burning against a black field. And with each passing year, the Council's nightmare became more real. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. They were advancing. The galaxy watched with growing unease. Council scouts sent to monitor human space returned with terrifying reports. Their ships are faster than ours. Their weapons burn through our strongest shields. Their colonies grow like wildfire. The Council tried to hide their fear, but whispers spread. Worlds under their rule began to question whether the Council was as strong as it claimed. Some even wondered if the future truly belonged to the humans. But rebirth was not only about power. It was also about identity. Ambassador Renard, the man who once stood alone in the council chamber, became the voice of the new dominion. His speeches carried across every colony, binding them together. We were cast into the void to die. But look at us now. From ruins we have built towers. From hunger we have built strength. From exile we have built unity. The galaxy called us dangerous. Let them call us what we truly are, free. His words echoed not only in human ears, but in alien ones too. Discontent races, long oppressed by the Council, listened to the broadcasts in secret. Some began to wonder if they should side with the Dominion when the time came. The Council grew desperate. They sent envoys to warn humanity, to threaten them with consequences, but humanity was no longer afraid. One Council ship landed on Mars, demanding that the Dominion disband its fleets. Admiral Dorian himself greeted them. He stood tall, his uniform marked with the Dominion's silver star. "Disband," he said with a cold smile. "We were banished to die. Instead, we were reborn. Tell your council this. We do not bow, we do not beg, and we do not break. Humanity is not your subject anymore. We are your equal, or your enemy." The envoy left in silence, shaken by the sight of a fleet larger than any the council had imagined. The rebirth was no longer hidden. It was undeniable. From the cold void of space, entire armadas rose, each ship forged by human hands and powered by human will. Fleets patrolled human worlds, their weapons gleaming in the starlight. Colonies expanded, no longer begging for survival, but demanding their place in the stars. And as the first Dominion fleets crossed into neutral space, every world in the galaxy felt the same truth. Humanity had returned. On a quiet night, Dr. Vera looked up at the stars from Earth's surface. The sky was filled with trails of ships leaving orbit, glowing like falling stars. She whispered to herself, "They thought they ended us, but we were only beginning." Her words captured the spirit of a people who had been broken, then reforged into something unshakable. Humanity was no longer an exile. Humanity was a force, and the Dominion's rebirth was only the start of a storm that would change the galaxy forever. The Dominion had risen from ashes. Ships were built, colonies thrived, and humanity stood taller than ever before. But the Galactic Council could not ignore them forever. Fear grew like a storm, and fear always leads to war. It began at the edge of Council space, near a small mining world named Veyros. The planet was rich in rare metals, long claimed by the Council. But the Dominion needed it too. When human ships arrived in orbit to begin mining, the Council sent a patrol fleet to drive them away. The Council expected surrender. They believed humans were still outcasts, still weak. They thought one show of force would send the Dominion back into hiding. They were wrong. Admiral Cade Dorian stood on the bridge of the Invictus, watching as the Council fleet came into view. Their ships were sleek, covered in gold plating, symbols of power. 10 vessels, armed with heavy cannons, moved in formation. A Council voice crackled over the comms. Cold, commanding, filled with arrogance. "Human vessels, you are trespassing in Council territory. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will be met with force." The crew of the Invictus turned to Dorian, waiting. The silence on the bridge was heavy, broken only by the low hum of engines. Dorian's scarred face remained calm. He spoke only one line: "Let them taste the fire of the Dominion." The clash began. The Council ships fired first, golden beams cutting through space. Explosions lit the void as 2 Dominion frigates were struck. But instead of retreating, the human ships pushed forward. The Invictus led the charge, its massive cannons roaring to life. Blue fire erupted from its guns, tearing through the shields of a Council cruiser. The ship cracked open, spilling flames into the void. Shock rippled through the Council fleet. They had never seen human weapons burn so bright, never imagined their defenses could fall so easily, but humanity had been preparing for years. Every battle fought in exile, every weapon built in secret, now unleashed its power. On the surface of Veyros, miners watched in awe as the sky lit up with fire. Children pointed at the streaks of light, their faces glowing with hope. For the first time, they saw humanity not as victims, but as warriors rising against their oppressors. One miner whispered, "The Council cannot stop them now." The battle raged on. Council ships tried to regroup, their commanders barking desperate orders, but the Dominion fought with fury. Fighters swarmed from hidden bays, darting between larger vessels like angry sparks. Missiles streaked across the black, slamming into hulls with deadly precision. The Invictus drove straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Admiral Dorian stood firm as alarms blared and explosions shook the ship. He pointed toward the enemy flagship. "Bring it down." The Dominion gunners obeyed. Wave after wave of fire smashed into the Council flagship until its golden armor split apart. The ship's engines failed, and it drifted helplessly before exploding into a sunburst of flame. The Council fleet broke. Some ships fled into hyperspace, their captains too afraid to stay. Others were destroyed where they stood, their wreckage floating silently among the stars. When the last blast faded, the battlefield was quiet. Smoke and debris filled the void, but the Dominion remained. Humanity had not only survived the clash, they had won. The bridge of the Invictus erupted in cheers. Officers embraced, engineers shouted with joy, and young cadets cried tears of pride. For the first time in history, humanity had stood against the Council in open war and prevailed. Admiral Dorian raised his hand for silence. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with fire. "Remember this day? Remember what it means. They thought us broken. They thought us weak. But today, the stars belong to us." News of the battle spread like wildfire across the galaxy. On worlds ruled by the Council, whispers grew louder. "The humans defeated an entire fleet. The Dominion is real. They are stronger than we were told." For oppressed species living under the Council's shadow, hope sparked. If humanity could defy the Council, maybe others could too. But in the Council chambers, fear turned to rage. Leaders shouted, demanding punishment. Armies were mobilized. Fleets were called to arms. The Council swore humanity would be crushed before their defiance spread any further. Yet deep down, even they knew the truth. The first clash had changed everything. On Earth, Ambassador Renard stood before a massive crowd. His voice thundered across the gathering, carried to every colony through broadcasts. "The Council cast us into the void to die. Today we stood against them and proved we are stronger than their fear. This was not the end, it was the beginning. The Dominion will rise, and no Council decree can stop it." The crowd roared, waving banners of silver and black. Children shouted, soldiers raised their weapons high, and for the first time, humanity truly believed in its destiny. Above Veros, the Invictus drifted in orbit, its hull scorched, its weapons cooling. Admiral Dorian walked the silent halls of his ship, watching his crew tend to the wounded, repair the broken, and honor the fallen. He knew the price of this victory was only the first of many. The Council would not forget. They would come with fire and fury, but humanity was ready. In exile, they had been forced to survive. In struggle, they had been forced to build. In rebirth, they had become stronger. And now, in the first clash, they had shown the galaxy the truth. Humanity was no longer banished. Humanity was no longer afraid. Humanity was rising. The first clash had changed everything. Humanity, once banished and forgotten, had stood against the Galactic Council and triumphed. The victory at Veros was not just a battle won. It was a spark that set the galaxy on fire. In every human colony, bells rang, banners waved, and voices rose in celebration. People who had once lived in fear now lifted their heads with pride. They no longer whispered about survival. They shouted about destiny. The Dominion was no longer a dream. It was alive, and it was rising. On Earth, the streets of New Geneva overflowed with people. Massive screens lit the night sky, showing footage of the battle. Children cheered as the Invictus, scarred but unbroken, flew through the stars. Families cried as Admiral Cade Dorian saluted the crowds, his voice strong and steady. "We were cast into exile, he declared, his words carrying to every colony. But today we stand as builders of a new age. Humanity does not crawl in the shadows. Humanity rises. The cheers shook the city like thunder, but celebration was only the beginning. Across Mars, new shipyards expanded, growing larger than cities. Factories worked day and night, pouring steel and fire into engines of war. Entire deserts were transformed into glowing seas of machinery, where new battleships rose like mountains of iron. On Europa, miners tunneled into frozen oceans, extracting rare fuels that powered Dominion fleets. Beneath the ice, communities thrived in glowing caverns, their walls carved with symbols of the Silver Star, the mark of the Dominion. On Titan, massive orbital platforms were built, serving as both shipyards and fortresses. From there, the Dominion could strike into deep space at will. The galaxy had tried to exile humanity. Instead, it had forced them to unite, to build, to create something far stronger than any council world had imagined. But the Dominion's rise was not only through strength, it was also through alliances. Across the stars, other species watched with careful eyes. For centuries, many had lived under the Council's rule, bound by laws that crushed them, controlled them, silenced them. These races saw the humans not as monsters, but as a chance for change. In secret, envoys came to the Dominion. They arrived in hidden ships cloaked in shadows, carrying messages of hope. One such envoy was from the Drakons, a reptilian species long pressed under council taxation. Their leader, scaled and scarred, bowed before Ambassador Renard. "The council calls you dangerous," the Drakon said, "but we see you as something else. You are free. Teach us your ways, and we will fight by your side." Renard looked into the alien's eyes, then extended his hand. "Then let us rise together." Whispers spread like fire. The humans were not alone anymore. Small rebellions began to spark on council worlds. Ships vanished from their fleets, stolen by those who no longer wished to serve. Rumors of defection grew. The council tried to crush the news, but the galaxy could not be silenced. For the first time in history, the council's grip was loosening. Admiral Dorian knew what this meant. War on a larger scale was coming. He stood on the command deck of the Invictus as new fleets joined the Dominion. Before him stretched thousands of ships, frigates, cruisers, carriers, all marked with the Silver Star. He spoke to his officers with iron in his voice. "Every ship we build, every ally we gain, every world we reclaim, it all brings us closer to our destiny. The Council will come, and when they do, they will see not an outcast race, but a Dominion greater than their own." His officers saluted, their eyes blazing with pride. But even as the Dominion grew, shadows of danger remained. The Council gathered massive fleets, vowing revenge. In their grand chambers, alien leaders shouted with fury. "Humanity must be crushed before their rebellion spreads. They are a disease. Destroy them now." Armies were mobilized, fleets summoned from distant worlds. The Council believed they could still win with overwhelming force, but deep down, fear gnawed at them. If humanity had grown this powerful in exile, how much stronger would they become tomorrow? Back on Earth, Dr. Alina Vera unveiled her newest creation. A fleet of ships powered by experimental cores, engines brighter and faster than anything the Council possessed. "These are not just ships," she said to the Dominion leaders. "They are symbols. They will carry humanity into the heart of the galaxy itself." The room erupted in agreement. The Dominion no longer planned only to defend. It planned to expand, to challenge the Council directly, to carve a throne among the stars. The galaxy watched as Dominion fleets spread farther, taking new worlds under their banner. Some planets joined willingly, inspired by the human promise of freedom. Others were taken by force, their rulers toppled when they stood in the way. Wherever the Silver Star rose, the message was the same. The Dominion is here. The Dominion will endure. The Dominion will rule. In the quiet of his chambers, Ambassador Renard stared at the stars. His voice was soft, but his words carried the weight of destiny. "They banished us from the stars, thinking it would end us. But in truth, they gave us what we needed most, unity. And now, with unity, we rise not as outcasts, but as rulers of our own dominion. The dominion was no longer in exile. The dominion was no longer struggling for survival. The dominion was rising, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy trembled. For years, whispers had spread from star to star. Humanity, once exiled, had not vanished. They had rebuilt. They had risen, and now their fleets stretched farther than the Council dared admit. The Dominion was no longer a shadow. It was a storm, and that storm was coming. In the Galactic Council chambers, tension crackled like fire. Leaders of countless worlds argued in fear. Holographic displays showed human fleets growing larger every day. They defy us openly. One shouted, "They spread their dominion like wildfire," cried another. "If we do not crush them now, they will eclipse us all," warned a third. But deep in their hearts, even the proudest council members knew the truth. Humanity was no longer something that could be crushed. They had become something greater, something unstoppable. Far across the void, in the heart of Dominion space, the fleets gathered. It was a sight no one had ever seen before. Thousands of warships, frigates, cruisers, dreadnoughts, and titanic carriers lined the blackness of space. Their engines burned like blue suns, their weapons glowed with silent promise. At the center of it all stood the Invictus, larger and deadlier than ever, its black hull reflecting the light of 100 stars. On the bridge, Admiral Cade Dorian stood tall. His scarred face was set in stone, his eyes cold and determined. Around him, officers waited for his command. "This is the day," Dorian said, his voice steady. "The Council thought they could cast us out and watch us fade. Instead, they forged us into iron. Today we return, not as beggars, not as outcasts, but as rulers of our own dominion." The crew roared their approval. The engines of the Invictus flared to life, and the fleet began its march. The journey to Council space was slow and heavy, like the march of giants. Entire star systems watched in silence as the Dominion Armada passed through. Some cheered, some hid, and some sent secret messages of support. For oppressed worlds, the sight of humanity's fleet was hope made real. For the Council, it was terror. When the Dominion fleet arrived at the edge of Council space, the defenders were already waiting. Thousands of alien warships, banners of every Council race flying, filled the void. The Council had gathered its largest armada in centuries, determined to crush humanity once and for all. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Two powers stood face to face, exile against empire, dominion against council. A council commander's voice thundered across the comms. "Humans, you were banished. Leave now or be destroyed." Admiral Dorian stepped forward, his voice calm, almost quiet, but filled with steel. "You cannot destroy what you created. You cast us out, and in exile, we became something greater. We are the Dominion, and we do not leave. We take what is ours." The first shot was fired, then the stars erupted into war. The Council's fleet poured fire into the Dominion Armada. Beams of gold and red carved through the void, tearing into human shields. Ships burst into flame, breaking apart in silence, but the Dominion struck back harder. Missiles and plasma fire roared from their ships, ripping through enemy lines. Entire cruisers shattered in explosions brighter than suns. Fighters swarmed like hornets, darting between enemy cannons, striking weak points with deadly precision. The Invictus pushed forward, tearing a path through the Council's largest dreadnoughts. Its cannons burned with unstoppable fury, its shields blazing against wave after wave of fire. On its bridge, Admiral Dorian stood unshaken. "Break their line," he commanded. "Show them the power of the Dominion." Hours of battle stretched like eternity. The void was filled with wreckage, with the burning remains of both Dominion and Council ships. But slowly, steadily, the tide turned. The Council fleet began to falter. Commanders argued, some retreating, some fighting to the end. Their unity cracked under pressure, while the Dominion fought as one. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot carried the same fire in their hearts. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for destiny, and destiny favored humanity. At last, the Invictus reached the heart of the Council fleet. Its massive cannons targeted the Council's flagship, the golden fortress that had once been a symbol of untouchable power. Dorian raised his hand. Fire, the blast shook the heavens. The Council flagship shattered, breaking apart in a storm of fire and debris. The sight echoed across the galaxy like a death knell. The Council was broken. Silence fell in the aftermath. The Dominion fleet, though scarred and bloodied, stood victorious. Wreckage floated in every direction, the remains of a battle that would never be forgotten. On every Dominion world, celebrations erupted. Children screamed with joy, workers wept in pride, soldiers raised their weapons to the sky. Humanity had done the impossible. They had returned. In the Council chambers, those who had once cast judgment now sat in silence, their power shattered. Ambassador Renard entered the hall, not as a prisoner, not as an exile, but as the voice of a dominion that now ruled the stars. His words echoed in the chamber. You banished us from the stars. You thought you could erase us, but exile only forged us stronger. We have returned, and from this day forward we will not kneel. Humanity rises, not as your servant, not as your enemy, but as your equal. The Dominion rules its own path, and so it was. The galaxy had tried to bury humanity in darkness. But humanity had risen brighter than ever, forging a dominion that would shape the future of every star. The Council's judgment had once cast them down. Now humanity's will had raised them higher than the Council could ever reach. Exiles no longer. Outcasts no longer. Humanity had returned, and the stars themselves belonged to them.